The Hollow Oak House. The realtor's key stuck in the lock, and Martha Reeves had to jiggle it 3 times before the front door of 47 Hollow Oak Lane finally surrendered with a groan that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than its hinges. The sound traveled through the empty Victorian like a warning, bouncing off bare walls and hardwood floors that hadn't seen polish in years.
Original fixtures throughout.
The realtor said, her voice too bright for the gray October afternoon.
Built in 1892, the Grover family lived here for 4 generations before.
She caught herself, smile flickering.
Before it went on the market.
Martha stepped inside, her footsteps echoing in the foyer. The air tasted stale, metallic, like pennies left too long in a drawer. Dust motes drifted through a shaft of weak sunlight from the transom window above the door, and she watched them swirl in patterns that seemed almost deliberate, almost like writing.
"I'll take it,"
she heard herself say. The realtor's eyebrows rose.
"You haven't even seen the upstairs."
"I'll take it." Martha had been driving for 3 days straight since leaving Portland, stopping only when her eyes wouldn't stay open anymore, sleeping in rest stop parking lots with her doors locked and her hand on the pepper spray in her purse. She needed somewhere to disappear, and 47 Hollow Oak Lane, sitting at the edge of a small Illinois town nobody had heard of, felt like the edge of the world.
Week 1.
The house revealed itself slowly, like something remembering how to breathe. Each room Martha entered seemed to exhale as she crossed its threshold. Not quite a sigh, not quite a whisper, but something between the two that made the hair on her arms stand up. The master bedroom faced east, its windows overlooking a backyard that stretched into woods. The wallpaper, a faded pattern of roses and thorns, had begun peeling at the corners, and when Martha pulled at one loose edge, she found another layer beneath, and another beneath that. 7 layers deep. She stopped counting and started wondering why anyone would paper over the same wall so many times. She set up her laptop on a card table in what must have been a child's room once. The walls still bore the ghostly rectangles where posters had protected the paint from decades of sun fade. Her work as a freelance graphic designer meant she could live anywhere with an internet connection, and the fiber optic cable the previous owners had installed was the house's only nod to the 21st century. The first night, she heard footsteps above her bedroom. Slow, measured steps that crossed from one end of the attic to the other, paused, then crossed back. She grabbed her phone, thumb hovering over 911, but the walking stopped as suddenly as it had started. Old houses settle, she told herself. Wood expands and contracts. The second night, the footsteps came again, but this time they descended the attic stairs. She heard each creak in sequence, knew exactly which step was being pressed by invisible weight. They stopped at her bedroom door. She lay frozen, watching the doorknob in the blue light of her phone screen, waiting for it to turn. It never did. By the third night, she'd grown almost used to it. The footsteps had a rhythm, a routine. Attic to stairs, stairs to hallway, pause at her door, then back up again, like someone checking on her, like someone making sure she was still there.
Week 2.
The basement door stuck when Martha tried to open it, requiring her shoulder against the frame before it gave way with a crack like breaking bone. The stairs descended into darkness that her phone's flashlight barely penetrated, each step groaning under her weight as if protesting her intrusion. The air grew thicker as she descended, laden with the smell of decades-old dampness and something else, something sweet and organic that made her stomach clench. The basement stretched longer than the house above should have allowed, its corners lost in shadows that seemed to move when she wasn't looking directly at them. Old furniture huddled under sheets like mourners at a wake, and the concrete walls wept moisture that had left mineral deposits like frozen tears. The water heater gurgled in the corner, a sound too rhythmic, too much like labored breathing. Martha found the photographs in a box wedged behind it, the cardboard soft with age and spotted with what looked like rust, but might have been blood. They were old, edges yellowed and brittle, but the faces in them were clear. The Grover family, according to the dates written on the backs in careful cursive. James Grover, the patriarch, had a face like chipped granite and eyes that seemed to follow her even in the still photograph. His wife, Elizabeth, stood beside him in every picture, her smile never quite reaching her eyes, her hands always clasped in front of her, as if holding something invisible. Their children, Thomas, Margaret, and little Samuel appeared in only the earlier photos. After 1978, it was just James and Elizabeth's smile had disappeared entirely. Martha spread the photos across her card table, arranging them chronologically. The children aged until Thomas looked about 16, Margaret 14, Samuel no more than 8. Then they were gone. She checked the backs of every photo after 1978. Just James and Elizabeth, standing in front of the house, the hollow oak tree in the yard growing larger with each passing year. She was studying the last photo, James alone, dated 1995, when her laptop chimed with an email. The sender's name made her blood turn to ice. Paul Grayson. Her ex-husband had found her. Oh.
Martha, I know where you are. We need to talk about what you did.
She slammed the laptop shut, her hands shaking. The footsteps started early that night, while she was still awake, and for the first time, she felt grateful for them. At least, she wasn't alone.
Week 3.
The woman at the town library remembered the Grovers. Mrs. Garcia had been the librarian for 43 years, and her memory was sharp as winter air.
Tragedy, that family.
She said, pulling old newspapers from the archive.
Those poor children.
Martha's hands stilled on the microfilm reader.
What happened to them?
Carbon monoxide leak, winter of 78. Faulty furnace. The parents were out at a town meeting, came home to find all 3 children dead in their beds. Elizabeth never recovered. People said she used to walk the halls at night, checking their rooms, even years after.
The microfilm squealed as Martha advanced it. There it was, front page of the Hollow Oak Gazette.
3 children dead in tragic accident.
Elizabeth claimed she could still hear them.
Mrs. Garcia continued, voice dropping.
Said they talked to her at night. James had her committed in 81. She died at the state hospital 2 years later. Pneumonia, they said. But
She shrugged.
people stop fighting when they've got nothing left to fight for. Martha stared at the new,
Paper photo of the 3 Grover children. They looked nothing like the footsteps sounded. Too light, too young. The footsteps in her house were heavy, deliberate, adult. That night, she waited by her bedroom door, ear pressed against the wood. The footsteps came as always, but this time she yanked the door open just as they stopped outside. The hallway was empty, but the air was wrong. Too thick, too cold, and there was a smell, aftersave, something woody and old-fashioned. She recognized it with a jolt of memory that made her stomach clench. Call wore the same kind.
Week 4.
The morning after finding Linda's photograph, Martha discovered something else in the attic. Behind a wardrobe that hadn't been moved in decades, she found scratches in the wood floor. Not random, but deliberate. Words, carved deep with something sharp, probably fingernails broken and bleeding from the effort.
He locks us in. James lies. James lies. James lies. The children. Please God. The children.
The words overlapped, some carved over others. A palimpsest of desperation. Martha ran her fingers over them, feeling the splinters, imagining Elizabeth up here in the dark, trying to leave some record, some proof that wouldn't be dismissed as hysteria. Near the scratches, she found a child's diary, the lock broken, pages water-stained but readable. Margaret's careful cursive, dated 1978.
January 3rd. Daddy was angry again today. Thomas tried to make him laugh, but it made it worse. Mommy locked us in our rooms. She said it was a game, but I could hear her crying. January 15th. Samuel wet the bed, and Daddy hit him with the belt. Mommy tried to stop him, but he pushed her down the stairs. She didn't get up for a long time. When she did, her arm was bent wrong, but Daddy said we couldn't go to the hospital. January 28th. Mama's trying to leave. She packed our bags. She says we're going on an adventure, but we have to be very quiet. I'm scared. Daddy always finds us.
The last entry was February 2nd, 1978. The children had died, February 3rd. The emails kept coming. Paul had always been persistent. It was what had attracted her at first. The successful lawyer who wouldn't take no for an answer, who pursued her with flowers and grand gestures until she'd said yes. She'd mistaken obsession for love, control for caring. The bruises had healed, but the broken ribs still ached when she breathed too deeply.
You can't hide forever. I have friends in Illinois too.
She changed her email, but somehow he found the new one within hours.
The house has a nice yard. Good place for a garden.
He was here. He was watching. Martha called the police, but the officer who came out, a young man who looked barely out of high school, just shook his head.
Unless he threatens you directly or comes onto the property, there's nothing we can do. You could file for a restraining order, but...
He trailed off. They both knew how much good a piece of paper would do. That night, the footsteps were different. Heavier, angrier. They stomped across the attic, down the stairs, and this time, the doorknob did turn. The door swung open, but no one stood in the doorway. Just that smell of aftershave. Stronger now, and underneath it, something else. Something organic and wrong. Martha pulled the covers up to her chin, watching the empty doorway.
Elizabeth?
She whispered. The footsteps entered her room.
Week 5.
She found the second box of photographs by accident, when a floorboard in the attic gave way under her weight. These were different. Polaroids from the 1980s, after the children died, after Elizabeth was committed. They showed James Grover with another woman, young, blonde, smiling. In one photo, she stood in Martha's bedroom, hand on her pregnant belly. Martha turned the photo over.
James and Linda, 1982. Fresh start.
More photos. Linda with a baby. Linda and James at Christmas. Linda alone, no longer smiling, a bruise visible on her cheek, despite the makeup trying to cover it. The last photo made Martha's blood run cold. It was Linda at the bottom of the stairs, neck bent at an impossible angle, eyes open and staring at nothing. Someone had written on the white border,
Accident, 1983.
The footsteps that night started in the basement.
Week 6.
Paul's car appeared at the end of the driveway on a Tuesday morning. Martha watched from the kitchen window as he sat there, engine running, just watching the house. After an hour, he drove away, but she knew he'd be back. She spent the day researching. Linda Morrison, 23, had married James Grover 6 months after Elizabeth's death. Their son, Andrew, had been born 2 months later. Linda had died when Andrew was 10 months old, rolled an accidental fall down the stairs. Andrew had been sent to live with Linda's parents in Michigan. James had lived alone in the house until 1995, when he died of a heart attack in the master bedroom. But there were more records, police reports, buried deep in the newspaper archives, domestic disturbance calls. Elizabeth had called them 3 times in 1980 before her commitment. Linda had called once, a week before her death. That night, Martha didn't go to bed. She sat in the kitchen with a baseball bat across her lap, every light in the house blazing. The footsteps started at midnight, but they weren't coming from inside the house. They were on the porch.
The revelation.
The door exploded inward at 12:47 a.m. Paul stood in the doorway, that familiar rage twisting his features into something inhuman. He'd lost weight, his expensive suit hanging loose on his frame, and his eyes had the glassy shine of someone running on no sleep and too much bourbon.
You stupid, stupid woman. Did you really think you could leave me? Did you think I wouldn't find you?
His voice was calm, conversational, but Martha knew that tone. It was the eye of the storm, the moment before everything went to hell. She gripped the bat tighter.
Get out.
This is a nice place. Quiet, almost creepy. No neighbors close enough to hear anything.
He stepped inside like he owned the place, glass from the door crunching under his Italian leather shoes.
You always were too trusting, Martha. Posting that photo on Instagram before you deleted your account. The one with the house number visible in the background.
The footsteps started then, upstairs, violent and thunderous. Paul's eyes flicked to the ceiling.
Gold house. Probably full of mice.
You need to leave.
Martha stood, bat raised. Paul laughed.
Or what? You'll hit me? Think you're so tough now? Go ahead, add assault to abandonment, you dumb broad. See how well it will play in court. You'll be owing me alimony.
The lights shut off suddenly, plunging the entire house into suffocating darkness. The footsteps were on the stairs now, each impact shaking dust from the ceiling and making Paul cough. The smell of old aftershave grew stronger, but underneath it was something else. Old rot, wet leaves, the smell of decay, and death. In the black cloak of blindness, Paul struggled with his phone, fumbling to find the flashlight. Martha held her breath as the footsteps stopped. The silence was worse, somehow, like kinetic energy held back by slippery hands, waiting to pounce. A predator mute as death. A match flared to life, but it wasn't Paul holding it. James Grover stood behind Paul, his face exactly as it had been in the photographs, but wrong, so wrong. His skin had a waxy sheen, like something preserved badly, and his eyes were black holes that seemed to drink in the light. He wore a suit from another era, and that woody aftershave smell poured off him in waves. Cole spun around, a scream dying in his throat, as James's hands closed around his neck. But it wasn't James's face anymore. It was shifting, melting, becoming something else. Elizabeth Grover stood there now, her hospital gown stained with old blood, her fingers still wrapped around Paul's throat.
He killed them,
she whispered, her voice like wind through broken glass.
My children. It wasn't the furnace. I was at the town meeting. He'd been too drunk to come. He held pillows over their faces. To shut them up, he said. They were too loud. They were giving him a headache. He always said children should be seen and not heard.
Paul's eyes bulged, his hands clawing at the spectral fingers. Elizabeth's face shifted again, became Linda's, neck still bent at that horrible angle.
He pushed me down the stairs,
Linda said.
The baby was crying, always crying, and I couldn't get him to stop, so James, he snapped. He couldn't stand the crying.
Call's struggles were weakening. Martha stood frozen, the bat useless in her hands, watching her husband's face turn purple, then blue.
We couldn't leave,
The ghost said, and now it was all three of them somehow. All three spectral, awful figures speaking in unison.
He wouldn't let us leave. But you can.
Paul dropped to his knees, hands falling to his sides. The ghost released him, and he collapsed forward, gasping, retching.
Get up.
Martha said. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears. Steady and cold.
Get out. If you ever come near me again, if you ever contact me again, I'll tell everyone what you are. I have photos of what you did to me, hospital records. Everything's documented. Everything's backed up where you'll never find it.
Paul struggled to his feet, one hand massaging his throat. In the matchlight, she could see the bruises already forming, the perfect imprint of fingers that would be impossible to explain.
This isn't over.
He wheezed. The match went out. Martha found her phone and turned on its flashlight. Paul was gone. His car started outside, tire squealing as he fled. She stood alone in her kitchen, glass glittering on the floor like stars. But she wasn't really alone. She could feel them, the women of the house, standing just outside the circle of light.
Thank you so much,
she whispered.
Thank you for allowing me to stay.
The house sighed, that same sound it had made when she first arrived. But now she understood it better. It wasn't the house breathing. It was the house letting go.
After.
Martha had the door repaired, had the locks changed and reinforced. She had a security system installed, cameras that covered every angle of approach. Paul never came back. 3 months later, she heard from a mutual friend that he'd been arrested in Chicago for assaulting his new girlfriend. The bruises on his neck, still visible in his mugshot, remained unexplained. But there was more to Paul's unraveling. The friend, Jessica, called Martha with details that made her skin crawl with a mixture of horror and grim satisfaction.
He kept talking about children.
Jessica said, her voice hushed.
Children who weren't there. His lawyer tried to claim exhaustion, stress from the divorce, but Paul insisted they were following him. 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. He said they stood at the foot of his bed every night, just watching. The girl kept showing him something, a diary or a book. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, lost his job at the firm when he had a breakdown during a deposition, screaming at empty chairs.
Martha gripped the phone tighter, remembering Margaret's diary in the attic.
The new girlfriend, the one he hurt, she said he was different after some trip to Illinois. Said he'd come back terrified of the dark, kept every light in his apartment on, even slept with them on. He installed motion sensors everywhere, but they kept going off when no one was there. She thought he was using drugs, but the tests came back clean. Just the bruises on his neck that wouldn't fade, shaped like fingers but too small to be from an adult. After the call, Martha climbed back to the attic. Margaret's diary was where she'd left it, but now there was another one beside it. Newer, the cover pristine. She opened it with trembling hands. The pages were filled with Paul's handwriting, getting progressively more erratic.
They won't leave me alone. The children. They show me what he did. I feel the pillow on my face. I can't breathe. This isn't real. This can't be real.
Martha was right to run. I'm becoming him. I see it now. His face in the mirror sometimes instead of mine.
The girl keeps showing me her diary. February 3rd, 1978. Over and over. They were trying to leave. Their mother was trying to save them.
I am James Grover. No, I am Paul Grayson. I am James. Paul, I don't know anymore.
The last entry was just one line.
We couldn't leave. He wouldn't let us leave.
Martha closed the diary and left it in the attic. Let it be part of the house's collection. Another testimony to the price of violence, the weight of guilt that could follow someone beyond even death. The footsteps continued, but they were different now, lighter. They checked on her still, but it felt protective rather than threatening. Sometimes, late at night, she thought she heard children laughing in the attic, but it was a distant sound, like an echo of an echo. She found Andrew Grover on Facebook. He was 42 now, a teacher in Detroit with a family of his own. When she messaged him about the house, about his mother, he called her immediately.
I don't remember her.
He said, his voice thick with an emotion Martha couldn't quite identify.
I was so young. But I have dreams sometimes. A woman falling, always falling, reaching for me.
Martha looked at the portrait of Linda she'd hung in the hallway, alongside Elizabeth and the children. The woman in the photograph smiled, but her eyes held the same fear Martha had seen in her own mirror for years.
She loved you. She wants you to know that. She never stopped loving you.
There was silence on the other end, then the sound of a grown man trying not to cry.
Would it be possible to visit? The house, I mean. I've always felt like there was something missing. Some piece of my story I never understood.
Martha hesitated. The house had been quiet lately, peaceful even, but she didn't know how it would react to Andrew's presence.
Yes.
She heard herself say.
Come whenever you're ready.
Andrew arrived on a Sunday afternoon in April, the spring rain turning the world outside into an impressionist painting. He stood at the front door for a long moment before knocking, and Martha watched him from the window, seeing his mother's eyes in his face, the same gentle curve to his mouth. When she opened the door, the house seemed to inhale.
It smells the same.
Andrew said, stepping inside.
I don't know how I know that, but it does. Like old wood in...
He paused, frowning.
Roses. My mother wore rose perfume.
They walked through the house together, and Martha watched as memories surfaced in his eyes. Not clear recollections, but body memories, the kind that lived in muscle and bone. He touched the banister where his mother must have held him, traced the door frame of what had been a nursery. In the hallway with the portraits, he stopped, staring at Linda's photograph.
That's her,
he whispered.
God, she was so young.
The temperature dropped, but it wasn't the aggressive cold Martha had felt before. This was gentle, like a cool hand on a fevered forehead. The smell of roses grew stronger.
Mom?
Andrew's voice cracked like a teenager's. The portrait seemed to shimmer, and for just a moment, Martha could see Linda standing there, not broken, not dead, but whole and radiant, reaching toward her son. Andrew gasped, his hand rising to mirror hers.
I'm sorry.
He said.
I'm sorry I couldn't save you.
The air rippled, and Martha heard Linda's voice, clear as spring water.
You were a baby. You were my baby. You saved me every day, just by existing.
Andrew sobbed then, 42 years of grief pouring out in the hallway of his childhood home. Martha stepped back, giving them this moment, this impossible reunion. When the cold faded and the smell of roses dissipated, Andrew stood straighter. Something settled in his face that hadn't been there before.
She's at peace,
he said.
I can feel it. She's finally at peace.
They had coffee in the kitchen, and Andrew told Martha about his life, his husband, their adopted daughter, his work teaching special needs children.
I think I was always trying to save kids who couldn't save themselves.
He said.
Now I understand why.
Before he left, he stood in the doorway, looking back at the house.
Take care of it,
He said.
and let it take care of you. It knows the difference now between those who need shelter and those who bring harm.
Martha nodded.
It's a good house. It just had some bad people in it for a while.
The living and the dead.
Andrew said, and Martha wasn't sure which category he meant. The house on Hollow Oak Lane still stands at the edge of town, and Martha still lives there. Visitors sometimes comment on how cold certain rooms get, how they feel watched, but Martha doesn't mind. She knows what it's like to be trapped, to have nowhere to run. She knows what it's like to finally break free. And she knows that some prisons last longer than death, and some guardians never stop their watch. On quiet nights, when the footsteps roam the halls, Martha leaves her bedroom door open, just so they know she's there, just so they know they're not alone. The living need the dead sometimes, and sometimes the dead need the living too. The hollow oak in the yard finally fell during a storm last winter, split down the middle by lightning. Inside its rotted trunk, Martha found 3 toys, a wooden soldier, a cloth doll, and a spinning top, preserved perfectly despite the decades. She cleaned them carefully and placed them in the children's old rooms. That night, for the first time since she'd moved in, the house was completely quiet. But it wasn't empty. It was finally, peacefully at rest.